welcome to episode 163 of The Route. The Route is a glorified coffee chat and podcast form that takes you from A to B with a new guest every episode. As always, I'm your host, Christopher Nascimento, and let's get started. Before we begin today's episode, just a couple things to cover. As always, if you haven't already, subscribe, follow, rate 5 stars to the podcast wherever you listen. That's Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon, I think 6 other audio platforms, and YouTube as well. And then while you do that, you can find us YouTube at the Routecast, and that same username is going to be where we're at on social media. So Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all that good stuff. But most importantly, for those listening, is LinkedIn. It's a great way if you want to maybe start your network. You can connect with myself, the guests, the different people engaging with the posts, maybe maintain it or even just grow it a bit further. So check us out there at the Routecast on all platforms, and we can kind of go on from there. With that now said, let's get into today's guest. Today's guest is brought to you by Zoom. In the world of partnerships, there's a simple principle. You adapt or you die. In this fast-paced industry, you can't afford to miss a beat. And that's where Zoom will help you win each and every time. Zoom provides premier real-time data insights for partnerships across broadcast, streaming, and social like no one else. They're always ready, and detailed analytics help you get the upper hand and save time in your day-to-day reporting. So if you're ready to upgrade your reporting today, make the smart choice and choose Zoom. With that, today's guest. I'd now like to welcome someone who has taken off in the e-commerce space, from joining their university scale program to now being the co-founder and CTO of Noibu, Filip Slatinac. How's it going? Welcome to The Route.
Thank you, Chris, for having me.
Yeah, hopefully I got the last name right there. I got a little nervous, I'm not going to lie, but Phil,
you got it.
Yeah, I'm happy to finally get you on the podcast. Let's maybe get into your route, right? That's what the podcast is called. How did it start? Maybe going back to, let's say you're a teenager, right? Did you always know where you're going to go to school for? Or did you have a couple things that you're looking at? How did that kind of maybe shape out?
I wish it was. I wish I could have a. Looking back at it, I wish I had it played out perfectly, but that's not how life happens. I think in high school, I think I wanted to study snakes or something like that, or reptiles. Um, and then in CEGEP, which is just before university, there's this game that came out, and it was called Flappy Bird. And it basically took the CEGEP by storm. Everyone was playing Flappy Bird. Everyone was trying to beat each other's scores. And to me, it just looked like a fun little game. I didn't think anything of it. And then one of my friends comes up to me and says, "Phil, the guy that made Flappy Bird is making $50,000 a day." And that just blew my mind. I didn't know it was possible to make a salary by creating something. I was always into creating something, but it was always for me. But I never understood that you can actually create something and get revenue from it. And then that kind of planted a seed in my head that I could use, or that I can make something with code and actually get a salary from it. And so what happened then is, I'm not too proud of this, but I ended up effectively dropping out of CEGEP to teach myself how to code. And then I applied to study software engineering. And it stopped me to ask any questions at any point in time, because now we're pretty far back.
Oh, that's the route. That's all about it. I've had one guy go 20 seconds. I had another guy go for an hour and a half, and I didn't ask a single question. But no, go through it, and then we'll kind of go on from there.
Okay, love it. Applied to study software engineering. Got in by act of grace. God, something was looking after me. And then met some amazing people. Met some of my best friends in university, Anthony. Met my business partners as well, Rob and Kalen, in university. But how all that materialized is through, I didn't really think that university could be a good starting point to start a company or anything like that. But university will give you what you put into it. University, if you just go to class and you don't really make the connections, you don't make the effort to participate in the after hour activities, to expand your network as a student, then it'll be just that. You'll exit with plenty of knowledge, but maybe not the extra things you may need in life. And once that clicked after 3 years, that's when I started going to startup events. I started meeting a whole lot more people. I started taking my networking much more seriously. And uh, one day I go to this startup event, and I was with another startup back then. Uh, and I see these two guys on stage, and this moment is legitimately uh, engraved in my brain. I see these two guys on stage, and they are speaking with so much passion. Like they are so passionate about this thing that they've built, or that I thought that they had built. Um, and I was like, I don't know these guys. I don't know their names. I don't know who they are, but I want to be with them. Like I want to work with these guys. I don't know what it was, but I knew I had to go talk to them. One of those guys, just as soon as the event finishes, he just disappears, which, uh, foreshadowing here, that guy still sometimes randomly disappears. That was Kalen. Um, I walk up to the other gentleman, which is Rob, and we just instantly we kick it off. We start talking about our aspirations. We start talking about building. We start talking about working on an amazing product, solving real customer problems, and we just instantly kick it off. We start talking about everything, and then we become friends. And over the next couple of months, they sit me down. They send me a text message, very cryptic text message. They're like, "Come at Starbucks at 6 a.m." And as a student, 6 a.m. is like midnight. Like you're not up at 6 a.m., right? And so I'm like, oh man, what's gonna happen? So I get to Starbucks at 6 a.m. They're both dressed in suits. I'm like 22 at this point. They're both dressed in suits, and we have a chat for 5 minutes, and then they're like, "All right, Phil, Rob and I are gonna go. This is Kalen speaking. Rob and I are gonna go chat." And so they stand up from the table and they go to the bathroom of the Starbucks. They spend 15 minutes in the bathroom, and they come back and they sit down at the table, and Kalen goes, "All right, Phil, Rob and I have discussed. Uh, we would love to offer you an opportunity to be an equal partner." And so obviously I'm ecstatic at that point. I say yes. And the rest is history, to be honest. The rest is history, working on an amazing problem, most importantly, working with amazing people and solving real customer problems. And fast forward to now, that was 6 years ago.
Yeah, no, that's a great place to start just in regards to how it all came to be and so many points that we're kind of go back to and touch on. And obviously we'll get to where we are now, but maybe we can just go back and fill the gaps a bit. So going back to let's say Sage Up, right? You're talking about Flappy Bird. At that point in time prior to let's say finding out about that game, was there anything else that kind of I don't know, struck your fancy, caught your eye, and was like, hey, like maybe this is something I would do. Maybe it was, I don't know, science related, business related, software related, or was it really that moment that really kind of struck you?
There was this constant fascination throughout my childhood with godlike characters such as Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg. Um, as a child, these figures don't feel human, right? They feel like they are so powerful. They feel like it's them being what they've achieved felt like a distant dream, felt like honestly like something that would be impossible. And I was fascinated by the fact that like our society really consider these people as above human, right? They speak about these people as God-esque. Um, and I was intrigued as to what made these people able to do these things. Um, and there's two movies. There's one movie that demystified that for me, and that was the Social Network movie. After watching that movie, I thought to myself, okay, this guy is just a normal. Well, of course, the movie is not how things actually happen, but in my younger self, I actually consumed it as reality, and the point I extracted from that movie was if you put in the work and you get lucky enough times, it is possible. It is possible to build an empire. It is possible to build a product where thousands of people love. And so there were slight seeds that were planted by by these characters, but it was only the how achievable Flappy Bird felt that I said to myself, okay, let me just give this a shot.
Yeah, that makes sense. So there's always maybe that in the back of your mind, and then you just needed like something attainable to kind of maybe make it possible for you, right?
That's right. That's right.
That makes sense. And I guess then going on from there, right? Once that kind of clicked, you had that moment where like, hey, like let me go teach myself how to code. Let me get into school for it so you can then I don't know get that basis and maybe start to network as well. When did you have that moment in university where you're like, hey, this is the actual value of school, meeting the people, leveraging all the different programs that they have? Because I think a lot of the guests I do have on the podcast, everyone kind of has a similar, let's say, learnings, right? I think mine was in my fourth year. I didn't really realize how important it was to network or, use all the different, programs that they have available at school. Others kind of know it a little bit earlier on. When did that strike with you? And then when did you really start to leverage it, let's say?
Way too late. Hindsight
Wait.
2020, but way too late. Like close, I think, end of my second year, maybe mid third year. And when I realized that that was possible is I had joined another startup before Noibu, which was called Neapoli, with my good friend, and they got funding by the school to work on Neapoli for the summer, and that was mind blowing. That was like $10,000 for two guys to work full time on a product effectively. And through that whole experience of me participating in a startup and seeing how much the school is investing in these programs, that I realized that I was missing out on a lot. And then that got infinitely compounded realistically when I met my two business partners. Had university not been had I not been to university, I would have never met Rob and Kalen, who are not only my business partners but fantastic friends, best friends, realistically.
I guess going on that too, like once you start to learn it, because I even remember I went to Ottawa as well, and then at the end too, I think I was learning about all the different like startup programs they had, and then I think I was already probably my last semester. I think you had to apply for something in the fall for them to have, let's say, an incubator program if you had different ideas, or it had to be a bit more advanced to get into that program in regards to the business idea you had. I never really knew that right till the end. So I think there's a lot of those things for maybe the people listening or those in school now, just kind of leverage that to go forward. And then when did you meet them at school? Was it in your second year, like right when you started networking, or is it a bit later throughout your studies as well? They met Kaylin and Rob.
Like third, I think
Sure.
end of second or mid third, in between that range. Basically, in that whole during that period is when I realized that I was underutilizing university, that I wasn't really taking advantage of everything that university had for me. If I had known that in my first year, I think I would have for sure accelerated my career, guaranteed.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. And I think some of the things people say too when they come on the podcast is even just that probably falls under the same thing where you have that student hat, let's say, right? Where you're almost like have more opportunity to fail, right? Because people are like, oh, he's a student or they're a student, right? And oh, hey, like come with me, I'll bring you to a meeting, or hey, like I'll tell you all my secrets because you're just a student, right? Like it's something where they kind of view it in a different lens. I think the same thing with all those different programs are like, oh, hey, these are students. Let's support them as best way we can, and then if you know that earlier on, obviously, like you said, you can accelerate that career from there. And then I guess going back to let's say that day at Starbucks, right, where you got offered to be one of the co-founders. Was that something where it was a fairly quick process from when you first met them, or was that like ongoing discussions where the more you chatted with them, the more they kind of, let's say, fell for you in the sense of, hey, this is could be someone that we could work with, or was it a longer burn?
Man, eh, I wish I had a better answer for you, but the second I met them, I think on both parties, we kind of knew we had found something that was extremely valuable on both ends, or I'd like to think at least on their part. But when I met them, I knew that I wanted to work with them instantly. They matched they matched my personal values. Their work ethic was similar to mine. Their aspirations in terms of what they wanted to do or what to get out of life was similar to mine. We were raised in very similar ways. And so everything just felt like it aligned. And the four things that I just said, you can discover or you can understand these things very fast by asking just a few quick, even surface level questions. And immediately it was like check, 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 check. And then everything else was honestly superficial, superfluous, because we knew that we would end up working together, in my opinion. And uh, yeah, the like it was immediately in my case, I knew I had to work with these guys.
Do you still remember, like, going back a little bit, when you first, was sitting at that speaking engagement or that networking event where you first, let's say, came across them and you heard them chatting and heard their passion? I think is what you were saying. Do you remember what they were speaking about? Was it actually the first few ideas of Noibu? No.
Oh, so I don't remember exactly what they were saying, but they were
Yeah.
pitching a very early version of Noibu to a bunch of investors at Invest Ottawa. And that's all I remember. But the amount of passion they were talking with is what I remember. Uh, yeah, I don't clearly that product, like we ended up sunsetting that product a couple months later after a lot of hard work and we tried. But we sunsetted that product because we realized that we needed to focus on a product that actually solved a real customer problem.
Yeah.
Um, but the pitch was so energetic.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. And I guess kind of getting into that a little bit. I know when you were touching on it earlier, you were working for another startup prior, right? And even now, you're saying once you started, with Noibu, and then you guys had to then, let's say, later sunset that product. Is that one of those things where maybe those learnings of, I don't know what that other startup was or what it came to be, but maybe those experiences or possibly failures kind of then led to where it is now? Because obviously, maybe if you didn't have those things or if you guys stopped, it'd be harder to be where you are now.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Um, but it's quite frankly, what was the guiding decision behind sunsetting the original product was not past experiences, was just something as brutally simple as just talking to our customers. And we were talking to our customers that had paid for the earlier version of our product, and they were all unanimously saying it's fun, it's cool, but it's not really solving like a problem. It's not if it goes down, it's not like I'm crying for it. And as a founder, that is heartbreaking. It's like your product isn't working. Your product is replaceable, or even worse, your product is useless. But the gift behind that is, well, perfect. Just find another problem worth solving for these people and build a product that does.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I remember, so obviously we've chatted prior too, and obviously I know you from before this. But one of the key moments where I realized, hey, like maybe my business wasn't going to move on as a sports marketing agency, I was chatting with an entrepreneur in Ottawa, and he kept talking about problems and like crises or crisis. I don't know the plural. I didn't go to English for school, but anyways, with that, as he kept referring back to problems and crises that you need to solve for people, I was like, I'm not doing that for anyone, right? Like anyone can maybe start this, build a network, offer this, and make the right connections, shake the right hands, and they're in the same position as me. I think that was a big thing. So I'm glad you touched on that. And then going back to your circumstance, once you guys kind of had those conversations or learned that, where did it then go from there? Was it a quick and easy, hey, this is a problem we can solve, or these are the problems that our customers are saying that they need solved? Or what did that process then look like from there? Because then I think that really gets to how things started to get rolling, let's say.
Mm. It was, it was, the process started, the process was beautiful because it's a clean slate completely. Basically, you get to approach the space in a completely refreshed, with a completely refreshed perspective. And so what we decided to focus on is to learn how to learn how to extract people's problems, learn how to listen, learn which questions to ask to extract really that kernel of pain that people have, that you could build a product that can solve that pain. And so we spent the next couple of weeks just consuming as much content from YC Combinator as possible. Like it was like our Bible, to be honest. We were just every single article for from PG. Um, we would just be reading. We would be watching all of their lectures. And after maybe a week, 2 weeks of us just absolutely consuming all of their content, we then took our existing customers that were paying for the original product, and we gave ourselves a 1 month deadline that by the end of this month, we better have a working prototype of a problem that we want to solve for our customers and someone paying for it. And so for the first 3 weeks, we were interviewing everyone. And then it hit. One of our customers, Ça va de Soi, actually on Sussex, you know the Sussex Drive in the Byward Market? They have a
Mm-hmm.
store, Ça va de Soi. They sell very nice shirts and products like that. And she started crying on the phone about her inability to speak to her developers about problems on her website, where she was convinced something was broken, and her developers were saying, "Nope, can't reproduce, nothing's broken, nothing to fix here." And she was so passionate about that. That infuriated her so much that she started crying on the phone. And then we said, would you be willing to pay $20 a month, and we're going to tell you exactly where those problems are on your website, uh, and we're going to speak to your developers for you? And she was like, I would love that. So for the next 3 days, what we did is we manually, the three of us, Kale and Robert and myself, we went through her entire website just looking for bugs, looking for errors, and we would write them down. When you click this, this happens. We put that in a nice PDF, put that in an email, made it look like it was a software that made the report, and we sent it off to her, and she sent it to her developers, and some of the bugs got fixed immediately. And when that landed, when the bugs got fixed, it felt it felt so good because the customer got value. She was like, "Oh, thank you so much for finding these bugs for me. This is very valuable." And we've never got that type of recognition with our other product. And at that point, we knew we were onto something.
Yeah, that's crazy just to hear about it, just making it look like a software. That's so funny to think of. But I think that's like how a lot of those cool stories end up, transpiring where it starts like that and then it starts to snowball. And I guess going on from there, clearly I think that's what maybe, let's say, pushed the snowball over the edge of a mountain and started to roll a bit and gaining some traction. How did you guys then start to develop from there, get more clients? Like, what were you guys then doing to really take it beyond just manually looking at a website and, making a PDF to look like a software?
Huh. I think we're still on that journey, to be honest. But from what we did really well is we figured out how to sell. We figured out how to speak to the problem. Kaylin did a fantastic job understanding exactly how to target that pain point, extract out of our prospect customers that they have that problem. And that was the chain reaction that we needed. That was the beginning of the chain reaction needed to get our product into the market. That really fueled our growth. And then obviously we had step by step, we built the product. So we exchanged human labor for code, and that code now does the thing for us. But if I go back far enough, I think there's this concept of product market fit, where you build a product that to match the needs of the market. But a concept that we don't speak too much about is sales market fit, where you develop the necessary sales strategies, sales communications to really communicate the value that your product is providing. And I think you need to have both in unison, sales market fit and product market fit, because in the industry, the best product doesn't always win. Case in point, Teams versus Slack. Microsoft had such a better distribution channel than Slack and ended up winning the instant messaging game, right? And that's because Slack wasn't paying attention, or I suppose wasn't paying enough attention to the distribution abilities. And that's why sales market fit or distribution market fit needs to come in tandem with product market fit.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. And just looking at it, like how it then transpires from there. And I guess now taking maybe a step back in regards to looking at it more from a macro perspective, right? Let's say someone tunes into the podcast right now and they're seeing, Phil's on the pod. What's he talking about? And they see you're, one of the co-founders of Noibu. Do you mind maybe sharing what Noibu is, what kind of problems you guys solve, and what you guys offer?
So Noibu helps you detect the most important uh, errors on your e-commerce websites. It allows you to work on the most revenue impacting errors on your e-commerce website. So in e-commerce or in any software product, you have so much noise, so many errors happening at any point in time. Noibu streamlines that so that you can focus on the one areas that truly matter most.
Perfect. Yeah, short and sweet. That's the way I love it. And I guess then from there, before we get into, actually, let's get into you specifically too. For your role, someone's tuning in. They're like, "Hey, I would love to maybe found a business one day. I want to, be a CTO one day as well." How does that look like in regards to your day to day? What type of things are you working on? And if someone just kind of shadowed you for a day, what would that look like?
The thing is, in the beginning of Noibu, like your job titles are irrelevant realistically. In the beginning, you have to do whatever you can, and it just so happens that I have technical skills. I knew how to code, and so in the beginning, for the first 3-4 years, I think I was coding almost every day with the team. Obviously, you have to hire the team, build out the team, make sure the team is rowing in the right directions, take decisions that are going to help technically, that are going to help the business, take the technical decisions that are going to make sure that the business can prosper. But for the first 3 or 4 years, I was coding every single day. But as the team grows and the company grows, your role as a CTO has to evolve, right? You obviously can still code, and I still love coding in my when I have free time. But your role is to really uh, set direction for the team, understand where the biggest blockers are, why certain things couldn't happen, and then not build processes, but make sure that the team doesn't enter those problems. Making sure that the team is structured so that it can handle a specific business need, making sure that the technology choices that you pick are relevant today, uh, even as they were a couple of years ago. Manage the engineers, manage the projects, talk to customers, extract as much information as you can from your customers. One thing I always like to say in the team is we are the servants of our customers. We exist to provide them value realistically, and it just so happens that we can do it through designing product, managing product, and coding. But realistically, we're serving our customers. And if we cannot serve our customers, then we're not doing our job. And it's to set up the processes so that your team can talk to your customers. You can extract feedback from your customers and then implement that back, the same processes to then implement that back into the product.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I guess then one of the things you were touching on there is just how maybe your role has evolved over the years, which obviously makes sense as the company then grows. But before we kind of get into, let's say, the overview and asking some final questions that I ask guests, and maybe to begin to wrap up the podcast, what were some of the ways that you guys were able to evolve? Obviously, I think you touched on in the beginning how you guys, you found a problem, you heard someone's need, and then you guys found a way to do that with the PDF and all that. I think that's a great story. And then getting to where you are today. But that gap in between there, right, where you started talking about how you evolved, maybe for those first 4 years, you're coding every single day. What were maybe some of the biggest things that you noticed? Hey, because we did this, we were able to maybe grow a bit bigger. Obviously, maybe finding that problem initially was one of those biggest
Mm-hmm.
reasons. But how did you
Mm-hmm.
continue to evolve from there before we kind of move on from that?
We touched a little bit on it. What helped us really accelerate our evolution is sales market fit. We found a really good messaging that landed with our prospects. And that helped us get customers, which in turn helped us fund product engineering and design to then build that product. And step by step, you deliver the product. Step by step, you make sure that you're constantly delivering value to your customers. And then the big bolt, how it evolves over time is First is you have to get your product in the hands of enough customers. Then you've built the muscle to do so. And then the next problem is, well, you have to constantly meet the evolving needs of your customers. As your customers grow, as your customers change, your product still needs to be relevant, right? The decision that they took when they bought needs to still apply every single time they renew. And that is a changing landscape because they're doing more things, they have more problems. And if it fits in your product vision and they're paying for your product, well, your product better deliver it, right? And it's as much when the company is growing, you have to you have to keep talking to your customers. You have to keep talking to your go-to-market teams so that you get that signal on what your prospects need in order for you to get more customers, but also what your existing customers need to maintain them as customers. And if you have these two muscles, you'll be able to extract the biggest boulder to work on at any point in time in the business. Because it's going to forever change, but the first principle is customer needs. And if you have a good mechanism to extract needs at the prospect level and needs at the current customer level, then you'll be able to evolve what you're focusing on every single quarter.
Yeah, and I think as you mentioned that, what kind of came to mind was just you're saying, first you want to get into their hands, but then it almost sounds like to you almost want to figure out how long we can stay in those hands, if that makes sense, right? Like
Oh
just to make
yeah.
sure that they're still holding on to you, right? And then I guess from there, that comes with going back to maybe those first few problems you guys were talking about, right? Where you're kind of reading the different articles and you're talking about, I think, learning how to learning how to extract those problems. And then it sounds like, just from what you're saying, it almost sounds like a full circle moment, right? Where you guys figured out that initial problem just by learning and listening to what people had issues with. And then now that's the same thing you're doing to, stay in those hands and keep the business growing, which is kind of a cool thing when you think about it, just that full circle moment. And I guess that's
Hmm.
kind of a perfect way to transition to some of those questions I like to wrap up the podcast with and have those first full circle moments. So this is what, episode 163, and I've said it 162 times now. I'm gonna live until I'm 103. I'm gonna be on a rocking chair, thinking about all the different things I get to do in my career, right? And this podcast is gonna help me remember that. But if I put you in the same scenario, you're 103, you're on a rocking chair, going back and forth, thinking about all the cool things you've done in your career so far. What's one story when you're 103 you're for sure gonna remember and be like, wow, I can't believe I got to do that for a living one
Hmm.
day?
Hmm. Personal, business, or anything really.
No, for this case, let's go with career or business. Like, let's say maybe it's that first moment at that Starbucks, right? Maybe it's a moment like that, or maybe it's when you guys finally had that customer pay that $20, or just one of those moments where you're sitting there, whether it's at your desk or whether you're walking home from work, and you're like, wow, I can't believe like this is my job or this is my career. I can't believe I get to do this for a living. And that same moment
Hmm.
you're gonna be able to remember for the rest of your life.
Then I think it's a really good question. It's a really good question. I feel like the more I think about it, the more moments I will remember. But the thing that really comes to my mind right away is meeting my business partners, meeting Kalen and Rob, like for sure. There was this type of when I saw them pitch on that, and I'm sure that I'm going to be listening to this podcast, I'm going to be like, oh man, I should have also said this and that. But in this moment, this is the one that really is flashing in front of my eyes. Is I remember watching these two guys on stage, and there was just something in me, some this type of force that just kept that was telling me you need to go talk to them. I didn't understand why. I didn't understand, like, I'm not a very social guy. Like, I'm not the type of guy to want to go talk to everyone. But I was like, I need to go talk to these two guys. And realistically, like, if I zoom out, there was my path, my life really took a fork when I met them, right? Like, there was a point before and after I met these two guys. And I'm forever grateful for that moment and forever grateful for them.
Yeah, some people would even say your route took a big change there. But yeah, no, that's cool. And to be honest, it's I think that's those are kind of things, right? There's so many different things that happen in life that it's those small moments like that where you go, oh my God, like that kind of changed the course for the next
Hmm.
5, 10, rest of your life. I think that's exactly what that question's made for. And the last question I'll have is, right, we went into the future. Now we're going to take that time machine, go back to, let's say, I don't remember how old you are in stage. You have like 16, 18, you finish that high school age, you're playing odds, you come across Flappy Bird. If you had the opportunity to go back and speak with that 16, 17, 18-year old version of yourself that kind of came across or just was about to come across Flappy Bird for the first time, what's one thing that you've learned to date so far that if you had the opportunity to chat with a younger version of yourself, you're like, hey, little Phil, this is what you need to know. Like, this is one thing I've learned that if I can tell you anything, this is the key.
Hmm. Start. I would go back in time and I actually say this to my younger brother, much younger brother. I would go back in time and say, start much sooner. Like we're young, we when I was younger, I used to think that a year is a lot of time. I used to think that a month is a lot of time. Um, but if I could go back, I would say to myself, start sooner. Take this way more seriously than it is, right? You're not a student. Consider yourself a grown man. Start working harder sooner. Start reading more books sooner. Start speaking to the right people sooner. Start talking to customers way sooner.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. And to be honest, I find those are always the best ways to wrap up the podcast. Where it's those simple things of, start sooner, do this, do that, etc. Like almost these small little sentences that kind of end up being like the perfect way to end it. And yeah, unless there's anything else you'd like to share, thank you for coming on the route, and that's what it's all about.
Of course, thanks for having me, Chris. It was a fantastic time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's it for episode 163. Stay tuned for next week's episode. Thank you.
Take care.